Hello and welcome to this sixth part of the series Welcome to SilverBullet. In this particular one, I'm going to do things slightly differently. I have a little bit of a script. I have a couple of items that I wrote down in my little SilverBullet, of course, notebook over here. But a lot of this I'm just going to wing, right? I'm just going to try and show you stuff. Probably a little bit less coherent. Probably I'll hit a little few more bugs than usual. But hopefully it will be useful to you anyway. What we're going to look at today is Space Lua. So we're going to look more at the Lua part, the programmable part. But before we get into that, what I actually want to first talk about, which I didn't really address before, is the distinction between regular or content pages and meta pages. So when we open the page picker, what we see are all the content pages. So these are all the pages in your space that are there and are basically representing the content that you're working on, right? These are your regular nodes. However, what makes SilverBullet kind of unique is that it also allows you to kind of like build your own toolkit, right? It allows you to build your own custom commands, your own widgets, your own queries, and all this type of things that maybe you don't want to be kind of like integrated into the rest of your space, right? It would kind of clutter everything up. So for that, we have this concept of a meta page. And a meta page is basically nothing different than a regular page. The only difference is that it is tagged with a tag that starts with meta, right? And the moment you do that, and let's do that actually. So let's go to the config page. Actually, I already did this before, so let me remove that and then. So usually in your default setup, you are going to have a page called config, right? And it will appear in your page picker. However, you may say, well, config is kind of like a meta thing. It's about my space. It's kind of like a preferences file that I don't want to constantly be looking at. So how do I get rid of that, right? Well, one way to do that is to indeed tag it with meta. And then all of a sudden, it's gone from this list, right? Where it now appears is in the meta picker. So there's a command for this, meta picker, command shift K. So we have command K to use the regular page picker. We have command O for the document picker. And we have command shift K for the meta picker. So if we now open that, it looks exactly the same, right? Except it suggests, well, we're now searching through meta pages. And you'll be surprised of how many pages are actually here. One of them is indeed config, right? So if we go here, there is a config page now. And this is the page that we have open here right now. So now, again, the file is still there. It hasn't changed. The only thing is that it now has been tagged by meta. So now it appears in your meta picker page. There's a whole bunch of more other stuff here. There's actually a lot of like useful pages and things that you may want to use. Some of these things implement Lua APIs. Some of these implement slash commands that we've used. Actually, all the slash commands that we used are implemented here. Let me just, again, we're going off the cuff here. Let me show you the table slash command. So the table slash command, let me demonstrate it to you, is basically this kind of easy way to create a markdown table, right? Because I can never remember the syntax for that. That's implemented as a meta page called table, and it lives here. Another thing I should address here is like, hey, this is a page named library standard /templates table. Where is that file, right? If I look on disk in my folder, that file doesn't exist. So the way that it works is that SilverBullet overlays the standard library on top of your space. So everything that starts with library /std is coming straight out of the SilverBullet distribution. It's not kept on your disk there. It also means that whenever we release a new version of SilverBullet, all of these things can be updated. So this is how we can offer you new functionality, for instance, new slash commands as part of the main SilverBullet distribution without you having to copy and paste files around. But anyway, this is a meta page that implements the table slash command. I'm not going to go into all of the details here, but like the structure of it is kind of intuitive. So it has front matter, right? By the way, you will notice this page is read-only. I cannot change it, right? For obvious reasons, so that we can swap it out later. It has a description. insert a markdown table. We saw it when you actually do slash. And it's tagged with meta template slash. And this tag actually turns this whole page into a slash command. So if you tag any page with meta template slash, it will turn this into a slash command with the name, in this case table, because that's the last segment, let's say, of the path, right? If I would have called this table 2, we would have to type slash table 2, and then you would get this slash command. Let's ignore this one, not super important. And then over here is the content, right? So this is exactly what we saw. The only funny thing here is this, and this is the indicator of where I would like my cursor to be after the slash command has been invoked, right? So if I again use that slash command, and here we see insert a markdown table, you will notice that the cursor appears exactly where that marker is. All right, so this was just to show you. I didn't even want to introduce how to create slash commands. That's a separate session probably, but like there's a world out there which is called the meta page. Let me just, again, off the cuff here. This is a useful one. This is a regular page, so it's not implementing any specific feature, but it gives you some useful stats about your space. So you may want to visit it sometime. Again, through the meta picker, because this will not appear in your regular page picker. Some useful facts about your space. Total number of pages. So I have 65 pages. Again, this includes everything, content pages as well as meta pages. So also the standard library. So this number is not extremely useful. And the total number of documents that I have in my space. So indeed, that's 2, right? So that's correct, of course. It also shows me all the active plugs. We didn't talk too much about that, but like there's different mechanisms to extend SilverBullet. There's the core of SilverBullet. There's plugs, and some plugs are built in, so they're distributed with SilverBullet. And actually all of these are distributed with SilverBullet, but you can install your own. And actually we're going to install one in a second. So it lists all the active plugs that we have right now. And it also, and this is going to be super useful down the line, show you all the active Space Lua scripts. And there's a long list here. Most of them are actually implemented as part of the standard library. And it also shows the load order. So it's going to show you, well, it's actually going to load these scripts from here to here to here to here, and then this, this, and this. This is the order in which they're going to be loaded. Let me click one so you can see. So again, this is a meta page tagged with meta. Didn't talk about this either before, but in addition to just putting the hashtag thing in the content on the body of your page, what you can also do is put that in the front matter. So you can create a tags thing here and tag your pages that way. It's equivalent. It does the same thing. In this particular config page, there are a bunch of Space Lua scripts. Again, we didn't. I'm going to talk. The rest of the time is going to be about only this. And it has a certain priorities, which controls the sort order and so on. So here you can kind of dig through all the type of stuff that is being loaded. Most of it you don't have to care about, but also your own stuff may appear in here as well when you create your own things. So we have active Space Lua and we have active Space Style. And Space Style are styles you can use to actually change the looks of SilverBullet itself. Not going to talk about that today, but that's another feature we have. Another thing, a useful meta page, as we hear anyway, is the maintenance page. So again, this is a meta page. So the way you get there is by going to the meta picker and then going to maintenance. This lists, for instance, aspiring pages. If you create a link to a page that does not yet exist, we showed that, and actually I introduced it as an aspiring page, if I remember correctly. There will be a list of those here. So for instance, if I now create something, right? And now I go back to my maintenance page, you'll see that under aspiring pages, there's a broken link to this thing on the index page. So we can actually see where that happened. And we can also just immediately click here, I think. Huh, interesting. So I told you we may be running into bugs. In this case, we're going to run into bugs. In theory, you should be able to click on that and immediately create that page, right? Conflicting copies. So another thing that may happen, and maybe this has already happened to you, is that the sync engine, it may happen that you have a page open on your phone and you have a page open on your desktop machine, and for some reason you have edits in both, and then they have to sync back. If that happens, we do not right now have super fancy like conflict resolution. Basically what will happen, it will create a conflicting copy. There will be a notification there that says like, hey, like sync error, creating a conflict copy, and it will just appear in your page list basically. But if you have such pages, it will also appear here. That's why we call it the maintenance page. It's a useful page to visit from time to time to understand what broken links you have, because it may also be that you deleted some stuff and you have still links to them. If you are the person that wants to keep things clean, those will appear as aspiring pages. Or you may, through sync conflicts, have a bunch of like conflict copies here. They will appear here too. You can look at them, you can do manual merge, you can delete them to kind of keep things clean. Okay, those are two examples of useful meta pages, FYI. All right. Okay, I alluded to, okay, so my config page is now a meta page, so it's here. I alluded to plugs, and actually let us start there. I'm not going to dive, like, I think I should probably do a separate video where I kind of demonstrate some of the interesting plugs that exist. Not going to do that now. I just want to demonstrate one because it's our introduction to using Space Lua. So the config page in SilverBullet is kind of special, but not that special. Like the config page, it's automatically generated. It's by default kind of empty. It more or less looks like this. And it says like, hey, this is the place where you can override some of the configuration options. And then there's this block in a language called Space Lua. And here, this is actually editable. So this is markdown syntax for using programming languages. You can just do this. You can say, I'm writing Perl right now, like hello. You can put JavaScript in your notes. You can put all this type of thing. All of that, the only purpose generally is to just have nice looking syntax highlighted code examples in your documents, except for a couple of languages. And they all start conveniently with space. So Space Lua has special meaning. In SilverBullet, of course, it does also do the whole rendering nicely with syntax highlighting thing. But in addition, during the index step, all these scripts are going to be pulled out and executed in sequence. And this is what we just saw in the space overview list here, that these were all the Space Lua scripts, all the blocks all across my space that were pulled out, indexed, and now are constantly being run. And we'll get into what that means exactly. In the config page, the only thing that you should be doing is calling the config API. Generally, it doesn't really matter where you put your Space Lua scripts. It can be anywhere, but we do recommend, and there's subtle reasons that I will not get into, put the config options all in your config page. There's good reasons to do that, even for cleanliness, right? So for instance, here it sets the plugs configuration. By default, it's empty. We don't have any plugs installed. We do have a bunch of built-in plugs installed. Actually, a lot of functionality in SilverBullet is implemented as plugs. But we don't have any additional plugs installed. So where do plugs come from? One way to find them is you can go to the community forums, and people are posting whatever they built there. Also on the SilverBullet website itself, there's a plugs page which lists some of them that are kind of, I would say, vetted, right? Like that a lot of people are using. The one I want to demonstrate here is Silver Search, which is basically like a better or like a real proper implementation of search for your SilverBullet space. It's way nicer than the full text search. By the way, we do have full text search. So what you can do is like you can look for plug or whatever, Command Shift F, and then it will search through that space. So that kind of works, but the ordering is limited and the quality of the results is very poor, to be honest. Like, luckily though, we have Silver Search. So let's install the Silver Search plug. So the way you do that, usually all these readmes have like a kind of URI thing that you can just copy and paste. And then we go to our config page and we paste that in. So this by itself doesn't do anything yet. All it will do the moment that we kind of reload all the scripts is that it sets this configuration option that, again, doesn't do anything by itself. We do have a plugs update command, though, Command-Shift-P, which will basically go through all this list and then start to download them if they are not already downloaded, or update them if they're not already up to date. So now what we just did was we installed Silver Search. Just in case we're going to rebuild, re-index the whole space. I don't think this is technically necessary, but basically Silver Search hooks into the general indexing infrastructure of SilverBullet, which is also why it's a nice example to show here. And it's now going to perform a full space index. And in addition to the regular search that we used before, we now also have Command S, which triggers Silver Search. So here we can now do Frank or whatever, Jenny, right, Frank was not there. As you can see, like as I type, I get results. So this is already way nicer. You get syntax highlighting here. It shows you the matches, it highlights them. Silver Search, way better than using the built-in search engine. I may just delete it, to be honest. But anyway, you have to install it yourself for now. So you can do that, and this is how you do that, right? So in the Space Lua script, you call the config.set, which is Lua code, right? There's an API called config.set. It takes two arguments. It takes a string and it takes a table. And a table in Lua can be either like a list or an array, or it can be a map. In this particular case, it's a list. So we just have a list. We can just put a list of all the plugs that we want here, right? Of course, I'm not going to triple install the same thing, but you get the idea. And then to actually install that, you use the update plugs command and it will install everything. You don't have to reload anything. It's kind of live. So also if I just comment this out again, I think my Command S search thing is now gone because it uninstalled that plug. All right. So there's a whole bunch of configuration options you can set here. Some of them supplied or specific to the standard library, some by plugs, and usually, and I think Silver Search is an example of this, there's a whole bunch of ways that you can actually configure Silver Search, tweaking all the weights, do all kinds of fancy stuff. Again, also from SpaceScript. So from the Space Lua. So you can just add all these options here to set them, right? Okay. All right, so this is just a very basic introduction to using Space Lua to set configuration. Now, what we're going to do is build up a little bit from the ground, right? What I'm going to do is I'm just creating a new page with a Space Lua script and show you how that all works. So actually, it's good practice, and none of this is enforced, but it's good practice to use the library prefix for this type of stuff. So I'm just going to say, rename this page to library play, and I'm also going to tag it with meta, so that again, when I go back here and I do not have my playground or my own stuff in this list, it's only in the meta picker. So here at the top, the play page, right? Again, there's no technical reasons why you would need to call this library slash, but because we also have library slash std, it's kind of an obvious, clean place to keep it. Of course, whatever we put in here will actually appear on disk. Let me see if I can show this to you. So this is where my server was running. And now we see that we do have a folder here called library, which has a single file in there, right? Which is this file. So this is actually kept on disk. Like the library std stuff you will not see, but the other stuff you do, right? Going back online. Space Lua. So Space Lua is Lua, my custom implementation of Lua. Not going to get into the details on why I found it necessary to implement Lua myself. Trust me, there's reasons. But anyway, it's based on this language called Lua, which has been around for a long time. Lua is generally used in as an embedded language. it's not common that people go out and write an entire application from scratch in Lua. You could do that, but it's not a common use case. What is more common is that you have some existing environment, and I think Blender is one of them. I think maybe even Photoshop can be extended with Lua. And you have a whole bunch of game engines, especially like I really like Pico 8, for instance. Pico 8 is this kind of like, if you have kids or you want to get into basic like retro style game programming, Pico 8 is a very nice tool for that. The way you write your games is also in Lua. It's a Lua based environment. I think Roblox is using Lua. The advantage of Lua is that it's honestly very easy to learn. It's a small language. You can, like, if you know any type of program, you probably pick it up in a couple of like hours. Like the basics are there. You can just read the whole manual. It's not that big, so it's easy to learn. And it's the implementation that most engines use it's small, so it doesn't use a lot of memory. You could also embed like a whole JavaScript engine, but this is generally huge, right? Lua is way smaller and it's fairly performant. So that's why Lua is kind of picked as a way to extend existing applications in custom ways, which is exactly what we want to be able to do in SilverBullet, which is why Lua is such a nice choice here as well. So we have a pretty complete, but not entirely complete implementation of Lua with some extensions, and we are calling that Space Lua. So what does Lua look like? So you can create variables. For instance, you can say, I am going to create a variable n, and you can put a number in there. So you have numbers, you have strings, you have booleans. If you've done any type of programming, you will have seen this, right? So what we're going to do here as an example is say like a local name. So local is making a local variable. And then what I can do is use editor.flash notification and say hello name. So a couple of things here. So again, here I'm creating a local variable name with my name in there. I'm calling a method on not a Lua specific API, it's a SilverBullet specific API. And actually, technically, it's a syscall. It's one of the calls exposed part of the API that is specific to SilverBullet to allow you to do SilverBullet-y things. In this case, show a flash notification, hello, and then we concatenate the string name after that, right? So how do I run this? So there is a command called reload system. System reload. It's bound to Control-Alt-R, and that's how we're going to call it, because otherwise it would be very annoying. And we run that. All of our Space Lua scripts are going to be run. Here we see hello Zeph. All of it. So not just whatever is on this page, but all the scripts that we saw in Space Overview in this order are going to be called. So first it's going to run this particular Space Lua script, then this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. And then somewhere in here it will be play. Yes, here, the play script. So at this point, the play script will be run, and then there's a whole bunch of other scripts that are going to be run after that, right? So every time we hit Control-Alt-R, it's running through all that scripts. Hello, Zeph. Generally, this is not the way we are going to work. What you should be getting familiar with and comfortable with fairly quickly is your JavaScript console, unfortunately. At some point, there may be another way to do this in a better way. But honestly, for anything non-trivial, you probably want to open your JavaScript console. In different browsers, this works in different ways. Usually there's like a developer tools or inspect element thing somewhere, which will probably bring you to the DOM, and then you go to console. Here I have a command Alt-I to open this thing. And what this is going to show you is basically debug information about SilverBullet itself. And this is going to be slightly noisy, unfortunately. So it's not great, but like, yeah, it's what we have, right? And what you will see is the moment, so I can clear it out here. The moment that I run my system review is that it's restart. It's saying, okay, I'm now evaluating this space script and this space script and this space script and this space script, right? In there, if I now put a print, for instance, I can put there's also a print command. hello, and I run this again, you will see that the moment that library play is run, you will see Lua hello, right? So you can see that I printed hello from Lua. Okay. This is useful. Using print is useful for debugging. Sometimes things do not immediately work. So it's nicer to kind of put some print statement in there and then have your JavaScript console open to kind of figure out what is happening. Sometimes something will silently crash or not work. Usually, again, look at your JavaScript console to understand if there's any obvious errors here of what may be going on. Is this the best possible programming environment in existence? That can you put in like breakpoints and do step-based debugging? No, right? Generally, and this is common in many Lua environments, like you don't tend to write like hundreds or thousands of lines of Lua code or doing very complicated things. This is really optimized to play with stuff, right? To build basic things, build basic extensions and things like that. If you want to do more serious things, you probably want to build them as in the context of SilverBullet as plugs. And then you write this in TypeScript, and there's a compile step, and there's type checkers, and you can use Visual Studio Code or Z or whatever code editor you like, right? This is a much more productive environment for large scale development inside of SilverBullet. That you can still do without forking SilverBullet and making your own version of it. Lua and Space Lua is really for like the quick things. But to be honest, more and more I use it, it's like, oh, actually I could implement this in Space Lua instead of JavaScript also. So maybe let me do that. And that's why this list has kind of grown over time, right? Like more and more stuff is now implemented in Space Lua. And the nice thing is that you can actually go through that. One more page I kind of wanted, let me collapse this thing because it's taking a lot of space. If I go to the STD, this is kind of like the root page of the standard library, which gives you a little bit of an impression of everything that's included. Again, still read only, right? And it basically explains what's included in the standard library. So it has a couple of page templates. Haven't even touched page template until now, but that's the thing. And it mentions, okay, these are all the slash commands that are implemented in the standard library. We looked at table, so we saw the implementation of that, but there's more, right? Code, danger, admonition. Funny thing is that how does it create this whole list? Can you guess? Of course, with a query, right? So it's on the fly, pulling, filtering, very similar to what we did with the inbox before, all these slash templates from the standard library and rendering them here. And that's how you get this overview, and I don't have to maintain that myself. Meta pages, actually both of them we looked at, space overview and maintenance. And there's a whole bunch of infrastructure, like export, actually I demonstrated, right, to export your current page as rich text so you can paste it into Google Docs. That is actually implemented purely in Space Lua. In here, there's exports to Gist, GitHub, importing page templates themselves are implemented in Space Lua. Query templates are implemented in Space Lua. And as you're getting more comfortable building stuff with Space Lua yourself, this is actually a great way to learn it. Because what you can do is you can just pick one of them and see how does this work. The funny thing about this whole system is that because these are regular pages, it's kind of a mix of documentation and implementation in one. So the actual implementation of export is a whole bunch of information about the architecture and how it works. And then the actual implementation is right there. Like this is it, right? This is not like some vague hand-wave description of how exporting works. This is the implementation. This is the part where the command E, right, is implemented. Export page or selection, command E, right? If I do this code runs, right? This is not a drill. This is real. So if you want to understand, like, hey, what are the best practices around SilverBullet and Space Lua, what APIs exist, how do I use them? You can actually learn a lot by just digging through all the standard library Space Lua code, because this is production code that you're using every day. So maybe you learn what the for syntax looks like, or the if statements, and what APIs exist, like this one we just used, right? And so on and so forth. So what I really like about this system, that it's kind of self-documenting, but it also allows you to really explore and dig through all like a bunch of functionality and learn more about the environment while being in the environment. And then you can copy and paste things, and we're actually going to do a little bit of that, right? To learn more about this thing. All right, where were we? So we covered some basic variable stuff, right? But before we move on with that, let me actually show you how to create a simple widget. So a widget actually is, well, it's a little bit of a special thing, but not even that. If you visit the SilverBullet website, if you scroll a little bit, at some point you will see there's a YouTube video embedded. Markdown does not have, I can say that, but I can actually show it to you, right? Markdown does not have a syntax here. There it is. So we have a YouTube video embedded. Markdown does not have syntax for embedding YouTube videos. The way this works, and you see it when you actually select it, right? I hope. It is basically right here. It's a call. It's a Lua directive that calls embed.youtube with a URL. So what is that all about? Well, actually, that is also implemented here. So we have, I think, the embed widget. Here's an example, and this is the implementation. And I'm not going to show you entirely how that works, but just to give you an idea that ultimately all this is a function, an API that returns something, and we'll get to what that is, and then it kind of injects that into your page. So let's go to the play page again and implement a simple widget. What I did here is I created a local variable. When you create a local variable, that variable is going to be local to this block. So this Space Lua script. If I create another Space Lua script, and I'm going to refer to name, it will resolve to nil. Like this will not have a value. If you leave out local, then it becomes a global variable. So now actually, when I rerun this whole thing, name will have the value Zef if it's executed in this order, which will be the case, right? And this is useful to know because you can create in Lua also, you can create functions. Like this. And these are global functions, so they're going to be available anywhere. So not just elsewhere in this page, but just anywhere. You can now go to a random new page and you can call the marquee function the moment that your system reloaded, right? If you do local function, then it is limited. It will only be accessible in this block, right? Which is a good way to not pollute the global namespace too much. So I would say generally prefer local functions if you just need it internally. If you want to expose something globally, then leave out the local, which is definitely something we want to do because I want to call marquee from a space directive. So let me do widget.html, I think is a way to do that, and say sub. Oh no, actually no. Okay, let me show you two ways of doing this. The ugly way. Okay, so a couple of things here. You see I'm getting an error. So the general idea of what I'm trying to do here is this. I'm creating a function, a global function called marquee. So that function will become available from anywhere, including from this Lua directive. And it takes one argument. It will then return widget.html. And widget.html is kind of a shortcut way of writing this. I can also do widget.new and then say HTML is a marquee. This is equivalent. Here you can return different things. You can return HTML, you can return text, you can return, I think that's about it. And what it will do is, like if you use this in the context of a Lua directive, it will say, oh, this is a widget and it's a HTML widget. So I'm just going to render this HTML in place. Why does it not work? I first have to restart the system. So when I do that, there you go. Now we have it working, right? again, let me show you this shorter version, which is this. But, you know, same idea. So now we can just, I don't know, we have a marquee widget that we can use for whatever. And marquee, by the way, if you're a retro HTML user, you may remember this from the early days, which still work in browsers. This marquee is the idea of like creating something. There used to be a blink tag also, but I think they disabled, like that's completely gone. It doesn't work anymore, but marquee is still there. I said this is the ugly way because, sorry, my camera is going away. Let me try to refocus that. Not sure how to do that. Okay, I think I fixed my camera now. I said it's the ugly way because you are basically just concatenating HTML strings, right? And when you do this, you're just asking for trouble. I don't even know what happens if you put in, like, for instance, text like this here. Yeah, it kind of tends to break, right? Because you just put in an HTML tag and it's not escaped, and yeah, don't do this. So what you can do instead is use the DOM API. And DOM API uses Lua magic to basically give you an API like this, right? Where, if I remember correctly, what I now can do is text. Yeah, it kind of does something, but it doesn't actually show. It doesn't seem to be marqueeing much, right? Okay, so now this is the point where we start to debug a little bit. Let me inspect this element. The funny thing is that this does render a marquee tag, but maybe it's broken by the fact that I put in this there. No. Let's see. Why does this not work? Inspect element again. Oh, because it's inline probably, right? So, okay. If I do the following, let me collapse this thing again. Widget.new. As I promised, I'll run into issues. Is this how it works? DOM marquee text. There you go. Okay, so one nice thing that the widget new does allow you to do is add these block thing, which turns the result into a block element. And I don't want to get into too many, HTML DOM based, wizardry, but like the marquee tag only works in kind of like div and block space elements, not in if you put it in a span. Anyway, this is kind of random. Anyway, I can fix it by putting block true here, and now it kind of works, right? So what this will do, so actually this is what I wanted to show. So what you can do is build up a DOM tree. So like an HTML tree in a more Lua way. So in here, I can now, I think it supports arguments. Let me actually try. So now I really have to go off memory actually, or maybe I can command click, I cannot. So let me just find the implementation of this. So conveniently, this is all implemented here, and it actually has documentation. Wow. And it has the marquee tag as an example. So the way you use it is use DOM dot and then the name of the HTML tag that you want to use. And then you can add attributes. So this is using a mix of two Lua syntaxes. So this is kind of an interesting thing that we should probably cover. So Lua, you basically only have one type of data structure. You have what's called a table. And a table can be used as a map. So a hash map, let's say, where you say, well, my key is this, my value is that, right? So that's a map use. And it's also used as an array. And actually you can mix them in Lua, which is kind of weird. So what you can do here is you can indeed say, well, my class is something. And then in addition, my body content is text. but we can have multiple of these and say, for instance, like, okay, I always want to put exclamation marks behind that. And now if I do that, you will see that it will render, and then we can see if we actually inspect this element. It generated a marquee tag with class something, and then inside there's two elements. One was and then the double exclamation mark, right? So this kind of gives you a fluent way of building these DOM elements. By the way, this syntax, so DOM.marquee and then curly brace, is a shorter version of this. So these two are the same. You can leave out the leave out the parentheses when you make a method call in two cases. One, if you, well, only if you have a method call with one argument, and only if that argument either is a literal string or a table. So in this particular case, it's a table. And that's why you can leave this out, which is kind of a nice natural way of writing something, right? Okay, so this is how you create a basic widget. Again, if I go to the YouTube thing, the embed thing, you will see that this is actually how it's implemented. It's using HTML widget. And it actually, okay, I did port it to the DOM API. So here you can see, right, effectively how that works. It gives you an iframe. It says the source to the embed URL. It puts in some styling to fix some stuff. It puts in a class, YouTube embed, which is implemented here in Space Style, which we're not going to talk about. And then it returns it. That's the whole implementation of the YouTube widget. So if you want to add a Vimeo widget or, I don't know, some other type of widget, you can just copy and paste this and tweak it as you want and put it in your own library and share it with the community so everybody benefits. And maybe we can put it into SilverBullet itself at some point, right? All right, so this is some widgets. All right, so creating widgets is one thing we can do. Another thing we can do is create commands, our custom commands. Let me take a sip of coffee. For this, conveniently, I created some /commands. So if you do /command, you can create a Lua command. And this is the API that exists to do that. Command.define, which takes a table with a couple of keys. The first one is the name. So it says like, hello world. And then a second one, which is the function to run. And this is, of course, a Lua function, and you can do whatever the hell you want in this function. This, by default, it does this flash notification thing. So let's see. Let's reload the system. And now I have a command here called hello world. There it is. When I run it, it says hello world. Voila. Any questions? You can do whatever the hell you want here, right? Like you can read the content. You can say, for instance, okay, now I'm really going to wing it, but give me the content of the current page. So editor, and you get some code completion here. So this is going to be useful. Editor.get text. Sorry, this is like text, write it to a variable. And now I'm going to, what would be a fun thing to try to do? Anyway, I'm just going to print that to the console. Text. So now we're going to open this again. I just restarted the system. I'm going to run here, hello world. And here in the console, we see, hey, this is the text that I read. So now I could use, I don't know, regular expressions to parse out certain information or do all kind of fancy things. Like I have a lot of APIs that are available. So actually, let me show you some of that. And probably the best way to look at that is just to go to the SilverBullet website. There's the API page, which again, also using a query, I think, pretty sure. Right, a query, of course, finds you all the APIs that are available to you. Or at least most of them. So this is something we can play with. There's a shell API, which allows you to run shell commands on the server. So let's do that. I can put that in a Space Lua block, or I can just put it in line. Shell.run ls this will run the ls-l command. The result of that is a table, a Lua table with a couple of fields. One is code, which is the exit code, which is 0 if everything went fine. std error, which is the standard out error output, and std out. Std out is probably the part we care about, so you can just do std out here. And all of a sudden we do a directory listing as if we would be running this command in a shell, right, in a terminal. This in itself, of course, ls-l is not something you probably want to run, but you can also run git commands this way. There's a thing that is not included, but many people use, is the git command script, lack of a better word. Let me find that very quickly. SilverBullet libraries is a repository where we collect a bunch of different things. In here is the git one. And this, again, is the full implementation of basic git integration. Let me show you how to import that. So what you can do is you just copy this URL, you go in here and you use import from URL. You paste in the URL and and it asks you how do you want to import it. And because it's a GitHub URL, the top option is GitHub repo file. That should do it. And then it will ask you where do you want to keep it. Again, it follows this convention of using library something. So git. So now we have the git library imported. So this is basically just by same as a copy and pasting this thing, except that it now actually tracks where it came from, which may be useful in the future if we want to implement auto updates and things like that. And this is the full implementation of the git scripts, which gives you a couple of things like the git sync command and the git commit command. It has some configuration options. The fun thing is that this one is actually editable because I just imported it, so I can make tweaks if I like. This git thing is nice because it's still short and it's honestly very powerful. And it uses the shell run thing, which we just looked at. And it gives you an idea of like, hey, you can actually do pretty powerful stuff with just a couple of lines of code, right? So the most commonly, and honestly the only command that I ever use in my Git integration is the sync command. And actually I have it configured to auto sync, which means that every 5 minutes, I think, it will automatically commit all my files and will do a git push and a git pull. And that's honestly my backup mechanism for my own space. How does that work? So let's look at the implementation. This is the entire implementation. So this is kind of like a nice convention best practice thing that is good to see. Here we create a global table called Git. And this is we're going to use this as our namespace, right? So that if I have a billion different space scripts, not all of those things start to overlap. So here I kind of namespace everything to just Git. So we'll have a git.commit function, a git.sync function, and so on, which is exactly what happens here. So the git commit API function that we define here takes a message, but it defaults to snapshot if it's not specified. It will then print in the JavaScript console committing. And then it will run a couple of things using pcall, which means that these things may error out. They may throw errors. And if that happens, this is kind of like the Lua way of doing a try catch, right? So you try these things. If all of it fails, the whole script doesn't blow up. It just kind of returns here. You can check, hey, if something was not okay, then we print why it failed, right? This is what this whole construct does. And the implementation is simple. It just does 2 shell run calls. Git add, so again, on the server, right? It git adds everything. It git commits everything with the message, and that's it. Git sync first calls this git commit thing. By the way, I think probably when I actually reload this, I can click on that, command click on this, and it will jump to the definition. This will work for a bunch of things, not syscalls, but some other implementations as well, to kind of jump to the definition. If the rule is basically this, right? If a particular API is globally accessible and has been implemented in Space Lua, you can command click on it and it will jump to the definition. So in this case here, right? All right, so it does a git commit first. It then says it will print pulling, and it will run git pull, and then it will do git push, and that's it. And then it exposes these functions, which you cannot directly call from SilverBullet. You kind of have to wrap them in some way as a command. So it defines a new command, command define, git commit. It runs, it asks you for a commit message, and then it commits based on that message. 2 lines, right? There's also git sync. As I said, that's the only thing I really use, which just calls git sync, and then it does a flash notification. Done, right? This is where the whole auto sync happens. So as I said, like the way I've configured it, and I think it's default, every 5 minutes, a timer will kick in, and then it will automatically do the whole sync thing. And that's implemented here. So it fetches like what configuration is git auto sync enabled. And if it's enabled, it will say, hey, it's enabled. And then it will listen to an event. And we didn't talk about this yet, but so we have the ability to create custom commands, right? We saw this command.define. We also can create custom /command define. There's a whole bunch of other things you can .define. Events work slightly differently. You don't define an event, you listen to event, because events generally already exist in SilverBullet. There's a whole bunch of events that are kind of baked in. You can also dispatch your own events and then have other parts listen to that. This is how the whole importing and exporting mechanism works internally. One of the built-in events is cron: second passed, which means a second has passed. So every second, this event is triggered. And if you want to do something every second or some other amount of time, then you can listen to that event. And that's what happened here. So every second, this code is run. And what it will do is we'll check like, hey, has a sufficient amount of time passed, right? I'm going to sync every 5 minutes. So I have to check if 5 minutes have passed. If so, then do git sync, right? That's more or less the implementation here. Again, this is pretty straightforward, right? This is a very powerful feature because like SilverBullet has no Git support in any way. It has no understanding of anything. And we're basically able to layer all that functionality on top, basically by just using shell run and some clever stuff around that, right? Which I think is kind of nice. And many of the libraries like that work this way here, right? So this is an AI assistant thing I was looking at. There's Ghost integration. I do all my blogging on Ghost, the CMS, fully implemented here in Space Lua as well, including all the JWT authentication token stuff. Anyway, like over time, this collection will probably grow. Somebody issued a pull request with a lot of new stuff, so we have to look at that. Right. All right. Let's see. Do we have enough yet? Maybe actually yes, because we're really getting close to an hour. And how long should these videos really be? I think I covered a lot of stuff here, right? I covered how you can write your own Space Lua. Maybe I still show you when things go wrong. So in my play thing, all this stuff works, but you may also run into issues. There's some areas you will immediately see as an error, right? If I leave out a bracket, that's fine. A thing you will probably encounter a lot is errors like this. Like attempting to call nil as a function is kind of like a common thing to hit. That is always, it always means that you probably mistyped something. I'm just thinking like, what is an obvious error I can generate? It's really hard to do anything wrong. Okay, I can at least make a syntax error. Now, if I just reload all of that, like here you will see a subtle little arrow that suggests like there's a parse error here, but you may miss that. And then you will again see this in somewhere in your console the moment that that script will have been run. So it's always good to, when you do a system reload thing. By the way, now every time we reloaded that with Control-Alt-R, you can also just reload the whole page, right? Which of course, as part of the booting sequence, also runs all your space scripts. And then somewhere in there, you will also see the parse error. It will say it's on position 6, which is not extremely useful because you basically have to start counting. Probably can improve that. But at least you can see like, hey, errors are being reported in the JavaScript console. So if something just somehow doesn't work, like nothing happens or it gives a weird error, open your JavaScript console and try to find the error there. Right? Cool. I think this is enough for today. I hope this was helpful to you. Generally, I recommend have a look at the standard library. If you're getting into this, like look at the documentation, of course, there's some documentation. But a lot of inspiration you're probably going to get just by digging into how a bunch of stuff in SilverBullet is implemented in Space Lua in SilverBullet itself. Page templates are implemented in Space Lua. Query templates are implemented in Space Lua. We can look at that actually. We used some of these in the past. You probably remember that we did the template.each query and then templates.something. This is where that's implemented, right? So task item is implemented as follows, template.new, and then this is like Lua has a couple of interesting ways of encoding string literals. You can put in double quotes, you can put in single quotes, or you can put in these double square bracket things, or even put like equal signs between them, and that kind of marks your string literal. So here the content of the template is actually this asterisk blah 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 state ref name. That's the entirety of the implementation of that particular template. We looked at, I think we used full page item and page item. Again, you can look at the implementation here because it's all there and it's not that complicated, right? Yeah. Okay, now I think I'm really done for today. We're hit close to an hour. All right, hopefully that was useful. See you on the next one.